Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the webinar. We're gonna wait just a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, real quick, to make sure people are logged in, that people have the access codes, all that kind of stuff. So, just a minute before we get started. If you want, I would be really grateful if you would share this on your social media networks. I would appreciate it. And let me know if you can hear the broadcast well. Okay, so um, as we're starting, I'll be looking off to the side every once in a while to double check to make sure that my webinar software is working properly. So making sure that's all good and dandy. Okay, it looks like things are rolling. Let me refresh something real quick. Make sure we've got this working properly. Like I said, if you would, if you're, some people who might be interested, go ahead and share this webinar out on your social media networks and stuff. I would really appreciate it. Okay, it looks like it is time. Oops. It looks like it's time to get started. So you guys ready? As you can see, I'm in my home office. My nieces and nephews like to draw on my chalkboard over here. I'm going to change that to a whiteboard. I got a whiteboard at my school, some whiteboard paint at my school that I love. So I hope you can hear me well. Everything is rocking and rolling on my side. It looks like it's going well. If you have questions at all during today's webinar, use the spot on the right to fill that out and send them in, and I'll get your questions. I'll probably wait till the end for questions or comments. I'll take comments as well, but I'll probably wait till the end for those just because there's a little bit of a lag in the way things work on my side, and I don't want to get you guys interrupted too much. So the goal is to have this webinar not take very long. 30 minutes is what I'm looking at. It might be a little shorter. It might be a little longer. I know I get annoyed with webinars that take forever and it's a lot of fluff in there. So make sure I'm going to try to do it quickly. If you don't know, my name is Zach Hayden. I am a martial arts school owner. I own ATA Excellence Martial Arts in Kendallville, Indiana. It's a small town, just under 10,000 people. I run a little site, just a little side project to keep me busy at mediacompany.me that talks about different things. We've got my podcast over there, Confessions of a Martial Arts School Owner, which if you haven't subscribed on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, I'd really appreciate it if you do that. It's a fun thing I like to do every week. So we have that over there and some other cool stuff. You can check it out. I want to start by saying I am not an expert at the martial arts industry. I am learning. I've obviously been in the martial arts industry for about 20 years now. So I've seen a lot. I've read a lot. I've learned from a lot of experts. There are some things that, I might be further ahead of you on, and there's some things that you might be further ahead of me on. And that's just the way it goes. But I wanted to do this webinar because I've been really interested in how staffing is working in the martial arts industry. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of different, there's just a lot of talk out there. And you see things in magazines all the time. And I wanted to know what's actually going on. So I started a survey that I put out. Let me actually get to the slides. So I'm going to get to the slides here. I'm going to do this in slideshow view. Okay. So now you should be seeing the slides. Again, if you have questions as we go throughout, use the the comment section on the side. Oh, wait a second. I need to go, instead of slideshow, I'm sorry, I need to enter full screen mode. That'll be better. Okay, so this started when I was just interested in how things were going in the martial arts industry. Research for myself as much as anybody. Because I want to know what's working, what's not working, what I should be doing, what's best practices and stuff. So I put this survey out. I put it out on all my social networks, some private Facebook groups, some public Facebook groups. I actually even ran some ads, some Facebook ads to the survey that covered Australia, the United States, and Canada. So that's where the results came from. Some of the things were really, some of these things are going to be pretty obvious to you, and some I think will be surprises. I don't want to forget, at the end of the webinar, I will have a link where you can download the full report. I don't have all the info and all the graphics in this full report, or the graphs, or in the webinar slides. I do have them all in the full report, so make sure you wait to the end for that. So let's get started with the more obvious results. How many locations per owner? Okay, this is I think was pretty obvious. One owner was the vast majority of people, or one school was the vast majority of people, and then two was the next highest. In there, pretty, I think we would have all guessed that. Number of active students, the number one was 1 to 50 students. Number two was 50 to 100 students in there. So that might have surprised me a little bit. 100 to 150 is 15%. Then is the next slot. Let's move on. Income. These are, again, I wanted to gather information about schools to see what's really going on and maybe contextualize a little bit of the information about staffing. So, my greater than sign is incorrect. It should have been less than, greater than? I don't know. But 43% monthly revenue is 10,000 or less. 29% is 10,000 to 30,000. 14% 30 to 50, and 14% is 50 to 100,000 a month. So almost half in the 10,000 or less. Here's where we get to some hiring things, some hiring issues, some hiring questions. Number one, I asked who hired staff in the last 6 months. 46% did, who are planning to hire staff in the next 6 months, and 51% said they were. I was a little surprised by this statistic, actually, and we'll get to that a little more in later in the webinar. But yeah, I did not expect it to be that high. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I thought this was pretty interesting, but not surprising. 78% of schools surveyed are using volunteers, okay, which I think is pretty typical for the martial arts industry. We have a lot of, a lot of that built-in culture to our industry. And again, this volunteers thing we're going to come back to later, because I think there's some good insight in this idea. Now, almost half of schools have only one full-time instructor. 49% have only one full-time instructor. And actually, most of those, or a good majority of them, I should say, were the actual owner. The one full-time instructor was the owner of the school. I think that, again, is pretty typical, despite what the industry might have us think. 31% had two full-time instructors, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then 20% had three or more full-time instructors. I'm sure we could correlate those to the income as well as how many schools they had as well, or student count, I should say, student count. More than 3/4 of the schools have a part-time program director. So part-time program directors were much more common than full-time program directors. So that's why I included that on here. Again, all the stats are in the full report. I don't know why you would have, 3 or more full-time program directors, but or part-time. I guess if they're sharing the job, that could be pretty common. So 78% had a part-time program director. So again, this is pretty obvious. Most schools are using volunteer instructors. Okay. And a large percentage, 35%, have 4 or more volunteer instructors. I did not clarify what the word volunteer instructors means. So that could be school owners that are counting junior leaders, assistant instructors. I don't know exactly what that means by volunteer. But again, we're going to get into that, this volunteer discussion in a little bit as well. 25%, if you look down there at the bottom, 25% have no volunteer instructors. Again, I think that is telling as well, and will come up when we kind of dive into what the issues of volunteers. I thought that was pretty interesting. In this survey, I really grouped everything into 2 main kind of employees, which I think are the most common in the martial arts industry. That is either program director or instructor. Now, obviously, there are, I'm sure, more kinds of school owners, or excuse me, more kinds of employees than just instructors and program directors. But I think these are the 2 most common, and so these are the ones that I wanted to highlight or get really more information about. Very few people are using volunteer program directors. Okay, 92% are using volunteer program directors, which I think is, again, pretty obvious in what we see, but I think it's an interesting thing to look at, that there are lots of volunteer instructors and very few volunteer program directors. I think that's interesting to check out. Let's look at these graphs here. When asked, this I was a little surprised about too. When asked if they were good at training new employees, 51% said they agree, and then another 22% said they strongly agree, which I thought was pretty huge. And then on the good at delegating tasks, 48% said they agree, and 20% said they strongly agree. This I was surprised with. I wasn't sure these were going to be as high as they were. I personally would be in the I answered the survey for myself, and I disagree with my good at training new employees. I'm pretty good at delegating tasks, but not so strong on training good employees. Less than 60%. So it was near 60% of schools have written checklists and standard operating procedures for staff. But there's it's a good percentage of people, not quite half, that don't have them, which I think, again, is interesting when you look at it in comparison to these stats. Now, this one I thought was really interesting, or not I shouldn't say interesting. I should say obvious. From everything I've seen, talked to school owners about, no one or very few people think it's easy to find good staff. So obviously there are some in here that think it's easy to find good staff, but the vast majority disagree or strongly disagree that it's easy to find good staff, which I think, if you've talked to your fellow school owner friends, I think you'd notice. Now, the next slide is the job responsibilities for full-time instructors. And there is just no clear consensus on any of this. I think the only thing that is somewhat clear here is that teaching classes is number one. Other than that, there's such a wide variety of things that full-time instructors do. Also, with part-time instructors, if you look here at the top graph, teaching classes is obviously the biggest thing part-time instructors do. But there are lots of other things that they're doing in there: birthday parties, community events, answering the phone, cleaning the school, selling merchandise, taking payments, doing introductory lessons, getting leads. There's just so much here that it seems that obviously most part-time instructors are being used for teaching classes, and then they're also being used for lots of other things. If we look at volunteer instructors' responsibilities, teaching classes again is the number one thing, then cleaning the school, and then none of these or birthday parties and community events. Again, there's still a lot of things being done by volunteer instructors. Now, if we look at full-time program directors' responsibilities, again, these are wide ranging. So the top one is none or not available, which is most likely people who don't have a full-time program instructor or program director, excuse me. But these are things like filling out paperwork, enrolling students, answering the phone. We've got selling merchandise, taking payments, getting leads, upgrading students. There's just such a wide variety of responsibilities for program directors listed here. And then part-time program directors, obviously you can see that most people don't have a part-time program director that answered this. And then of the other ones, they are pretty widely varying as well. Answering the phone, making phone calls, taking payments, selling merchandise. Those are really the top ones. Getting leads and doing introductory appointments are up there then too. But again, wide variety of different things there. So what's all this data mean? What can we get from these? There are some things that I took out of these that I hope will help you, and they're going to help me as I continue to plan my school and do some other things in helping us be more professional as school owners. So let's look at the data. This was, I think, the big thing that surprised me most. You know, you get the industry magazines, you read all these testimonials of people who are making, you know, $100,000 a month, and I've got 500 students in my facility and we're opening 3 new schools. And I know some people that are doing that. But it looks like almost half of schools have 100 students or less, and almost half of schools make $10,000 or less. These are, not what you hear, that half or almost half of the industry is not making all that much money and not have that many students. It seems that we are often talked to like we're the minority, which we, in some ways, I guess we kind of are the minority, because it's less than 50%, but it's not that much less. And it just seems to me that that's not talked about as much, that you feel bad if you are in this category. And it doesn't seem like that should be the case, but it is sometimes. Also, it shows that there's a lot of room for improvement. I'm not one that says that we schools, that have 100 or less students or make $10,000 or less need to aim for 300 students and, $60,000, a month or something like that. But 150 students and $12 to $15,000 a month, those are more achievable goals that people aren't talking about as much. They're talking about getting 2, 3, 400 students and getting, 50, 80, $100,000 a month. They're not talking about going from 100 to 150, okay, or going from 50 to 100 all that much, or from $10,000 to $12,000 or $15,000. And I think that's something we should look at more. Another thing that surprised me is people are actually hiring staff. Are you hiring staff? Are you looking at hiring staff? What's this mean for your school? Is it something that you should be looking at more proactively? And if so, I think the rest of the data gives us information about what we should be doing when we're hiring staff or looking to hiring staff. So let's go into some of that. Volunteers. Volunteers are a huge part of the martial arts industry. Now, this has it's a big debate. Okay. So let's go into some of the advantages and disadvantages. Advantages. Okay. Volunteers are willing and usually able help. Okay. They're people that have grown up in your school. They know what's going on. They, are free. There's abundant amount of them. They are tuned into your school culture. You grew them. Okay. They're willing and able. They're happy to help. They want to be part of your school. So those are all great advantages. Okay. Now the disadvantages, and this is what I think we really need to look at, is that you get what you pay for. If you're not compensating staff in some way, they don't, or volunteers in some way, they do not always feel obliged to be as professional. They're not as accountable. You can't really yell at them as much, and correct them and train them if they are volunteers, or at least it seems that that's the case. I know recently I went to taking some of my training instructors and giving them more real job kind of staff positions and teaching classes. And I told them I didn't want to not pay them. I wanted to make sure that I paid them so that I felt okay about it. They felt like they're more responsible. They're a little more accountable, and they're a little more appreciated. Now, money isn't always the motivating factor, but it can be. Now, where we need to be very careful is that we're aware of state and local and national laws when it comes to volunteers. This is really important. Even what you require students to do as volunteer work towards leadership or instructor training and helping a certain number of classes and whatnot. There are some big schools in, some of the country in California, I know, and Florida. There's some big schools that have gotten into some lawsuits because of volunteer help. So you really need to be careful with that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice, but I think we need to be aware of that and make sure that we are showing an air of professionalism in our industries, and our schools, in not necessarily using volunteer staff, volunteer assistants as much as we probably do. And I would venture to guess, if I would look at the well, let me go back one. If I would look at the data and compare schools with lower student counts and lower students, or a lower income, to people who don't have paid staff and utilize volunteers more, I bet there would be a correlation. Now, you may say that's because they don't have the money to pay for staff, but it's one of those vicious cycles where you don't have the money to pay for staff and you're not getting more students because you don't have enough staff or a professional staff. And you kind of got to balance that and make sure that you're working towards moving forward in your staffing area. We're going to run just slightly past a half hour mark. So I'll try to keep going. Seems that most students or most schools have completely different makeups of staff, completely different job responsibilities, even though most have all have instructors, obviously, and most have something like a program director. I think what we need to learn from this is that we need better, more defined job responsibilities, job descriptions that really say exactly what this job is. Also, hiring people for the job, for the task, not necessarily for a big job description you made out. When we go back and look at the instructor and the program director graphs that show what responsibilities they have, there's so many different responsibilities there that a lot of times I think it's hard to find someone that can do all of those things. If we would break the jobs up more and be more specific in what someone does, you can have more part-time people that you pay less because they work less. You could possibly use more volunteer work if they're doing small tasks instead of big giant responsibilities. You can use a lot of part-time. The problem I see is that we're trying to get jacks of all trades and masters of none, that we want instructors that can do everything. Now, I think they should know everything. I don't know if we should expect them to be really good at everything. I know I'm not as good at some things as other people are when it comes to doing them in my school. And so it's better for me to hire some of that stuff out. I also think if we would spend more time developing a job description, good training for a top program directors, our school student counts and income would go up. I know a school owner friend of mine who's got a killer program director, a fantastic program director, and she will say it is worth every penny she pays this program director there full time, and they are making money for the school every single day. I think that's a job that we don't specify as much, we don't clearly define, and we don't hire slowly enough and fire quickly enough, which is a term a lot of people use in staffing. I think we also should consider, especially those schools that are small, under the 100 number, under the 10,000 number, we should consider volunteer program directors for some of the smaller parts, hiring out just specifically for phone calls. Specifically for interest, specifically for appointment taking, even considering virtual staff for those kind of things. And that could be volunteer or paid. And that doesn't mean that they have to be virtual and you go to some online virtual training thing, but a student, a parent at your school who you can hire to do some of those things from their home. Some of that stuff I think could be to be farmed out. I am currently working on experimenting with a virtual, one of my parents that I am going to be training in answering the phone, having the phone calls directed to an app or different ways. There are different ways of doing it now with phones. And so they can answer the phone all times of the day, make it seem like our school, the facility is open all the time, though I don't have to be at the school. And using that as a small part-time gig for a mom that, doesn't want a full-time job, but doesn't want too much responsibility either. Now, when it comes to staff training, are we lying to ourselves about how well we train our staffs? And finding good help is not going to get any easier. I think there's a little of both of these going on. We say we're really good at training staff. We say we're really good at delegating, but we can't find any good help. I think maybe we're really good at training really good people. We're really good at training people who come in and are perfect fits for the job. But as you can see from the data, we have a hard time finding good staff. I think I think a solution to this problem might be redefining the jobs, getting better at writing staff training procedures, getting better at team meetings, accountability, motivation, systems and procedures, and hiring for a task versus hiring for a giant job. I know some people will then say, well, some of the comments that I had is that it is hard to find staff because people want full-time or more money. And I see that as a problem as well. But I think if you look at the data again, 100 or almost half have less than 100 students and make $10,000 or less. Obviously, we're not going to be able to hire full-time people right away. And so training on smaller jobs and moving people up is important. I think volunteers, when appropriate, more systems and procedures, more understanding of what motivates people. It is not always money. Okay? One of the big things that is motivating people nowadays is autonomy, being able to be a little more independent. And that's where this idea of virtual might be a good way to go. And by virtual, again, I don't mean they're not near you, but a lot of those things that they could do might be from home. Or on their own time, coming in on specific times. And I think more of this, obviously, for program director than for instructor. So you can download the full report. Oh, look at that. 11:30. Download the full report at www.mediacompany.me/report. Now, before you go, I've been working on something I have seen, and it ties directly in with this study that this report. I've seen tons of schools not using social media properly, not getting students from social media, still using some very old marketing tactics. Some of them work and some of them don't. I am not going to pay $200 for a newspaper advertisement. I'm probably not even going to go do nearly the flyers that I used to do. I don't do flyers like I used to, because who looks at flyers? Everybody's staring at their phone. No, nobody's looking at flyers. That's where social media is so important. And I see so many schools messing this up or just farming it out. And from the report, I can see that not everybody can afford to farm it out, and not everybody can afford to do it themselves either. So this is what I've done. I have spent a lot of time learning social media. I'm kind of a social media fanatic. I'm actually spending a lot of time this month in special webinars at conference, learning lots of new things about how to use Facebook, Instagram, all these social networks to build your business, to really engage clients and build brick and mortar as well as online. So I've developed a social media ambassador course. You're going to use what it is two separate parts. It's giving you, the school owner, the information about how you should be using social media, what you need to be doing on social media. But then it's going to train. Then there's training, video training, checklists and things, checklist worksheets for your staff member. So you pick a staff member or a volunteer. Again, check your local state officials to see what's legal, that will then do this work for you, because most school owners are doing this as a side thing and not doing it as taking it intentionally as a marketing platform. And I want to show you guys how to do it, but I know you don't have the time to do it yourself. So I'm putting together the training for Facebook and for Instagram. These are the two platforms I think you need to be on most. Okay, you can get students from Facebook, no problem. You can get students from Instagram. These are huge. They're going to keep growing. And you need to know what information to be putting on those platforms, how much to be putting on, making original content. I'm so sick of seeing same old forwarded things all the time. Oh, it drives me nuts. I get driven nuts by people who are paying for Facebook ads that are targeting way too much an area. I'm getting targeted by martial arts schools in Illinois. You are wasting money if you are targeting that big. So I'm doing a pre-sale right now. It's going to end very soon. I'm going to nationals next week. It'll end like at the end of the week of nationals, something like that. I will be raising the prices as soon as the pre-sale ends. I'm finishing working on the course right now. It's going to come out early November in stages because I want to make sure it's got all the stuff you want in it. You can use the coupon code webinar to get the 20% discount. Go to mediacompany.me/SMA, social media ambassador, because I want to build an ambassador for your school. I don't want you to have to do it. I see from this report that you don't have the time, and yet this needs to be done. So many schools are messing this up. So many schools aren't doing this right. And we really need to make sure that you're doing it well. So please, if you want to make sure your school is utilizing Facebook and Instagram properly, if they are, so they're growing an audience of potential clients, that you're attracting new potential clients, and then you are enrolling clients and students from those platforms for much cheaper than some of that old traditional things. Like I had a guy, a little yellow book guy, try to come in and argue with me about why I should have a giant ad in the yellow pages. No. You know how much money or how much more influence I can get on social media for the same cost? It's insane. But you've got to know what you're doing. Some of it is somewhat complicated. You've got to have the time to put in to create new original content, not just share the same old things that everybody else is sharing, and what is getting attention. So for just a week, you can get 20% off. The coupon code is going to expire at 1 week from today. So that will be, it'll expire sometime on Friday, October 23rd. So if you're watching the replay, don't miss it. Okay, 20% off that thing, the course. It's going to be good. I'm really excited about it. So please, I think right now it's at a cheap price. It's going to go up because I'm going to put a lot of fantastic content into it. Thank you for attending the webinar today. Let me go back to my the screen real quick. Here we go. I want to thank you for attending. If you have questions, comments, I would love to hear your comments on this data. Again, you can download the full report as well. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the chat box at the side, or you can find me in our private Facebook group on the Confessions of a Martial Arts School Owner. Search it on Facebook and try to join that group. And I would love to hear from you in there. Or you can email me, Mr. Hayden at ataexcellence.com. I would really love your feedback. I'm going to be doing some more stuff on this staffing thing. I think this is an area that we need to really work on in some ways in the industry. I think the big boys have it down. I think those schools with 200, 300 students making $50,000, $100,000 a month are killing it with staff. But I think a lot of us, lower number of students, a little lower income, I think we're struggling. I think there's more to be done in helping figure out staffing, train staff. You know what? I'm going to leave you with this. I would love, love, love to get your opinion on this statement. School owners lack the time and commitment to train their staff. True, false? What do you think? I'm going to put it in the Facebook group. Let me know. Go out, check the course out. I think you'll find it very useful. I think you will find it a good way also to see how to work on training a good volunteer. training a part-time instructor, a part-time somebody to do the job of social media for you under your direction. So give them some autonomy and things. So that's what I got for you today, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you check out the course. We'll see you later.